Berry, I actually loved it. This movie, I thought it was great. But one of the main reasons is because it's just in it. Like I just saw there was a new movie they put on HBO Max. It was this Angelina Jolie movie where, and it was called Those Who Wish Me Dead or something along those lines. I got like halfway through it and I'm like, this is the same freaking movie I've seen a million times over. And it's just like Hollywood it takes them so long to do anything experimental or risky. And when they do, they've already done it long after somebody else, like on the lower budget side, has broken ground for them. And then they're still hesitant to do anything new, just turning out the same thing over and over again. So I watched that movie and then kind of like just gave up on that one. I was like, I'll maybe watch the rest of that later. But I didn't have any really interested in it. And then I watched Friberry and I was like, this is great. What I really dug about it is that it's super weird. Now, it does not really have much of a structure at all whatsoever, this movie, but it keeps like upping the ante on its weirdness and keeps you engaged with it. So a lot of the movies that are weird but don't have structure can lose you on the experimental side. But if they don't up the ante on the weirdness or keep throwing new things at you to watch or just become repetitive, then I tune out. But this movie kept just throwing more weird stuff. So this is about like an alien, but this is about a guy who was a drug addict, and he definitely looks like a drug addict, and he's got kind of like the skullet thing going on, and he's all like looks like a tweaker. His name's Gary Green. Does a great job in the movie.
The basic blanket for the film is that this drug addict, low life guy gets his body gets taken over by an alien, and then the alien essentially sees society through his eyes. And what's funny is you were telling me before it's actually based on a 3-minute short, but you could tell these artists were probably like, you know, they do kind of deal with societal problems within it. Like they're talking about drugs and prostitution and gangs and violence and crime and all this type of shit, but it's seen through his eyes. And you can only imagine they probably got all wasted and thought, how fucked up would it be if an alien came to Earth and saw basically the asshole of society through its perspective. And I mean, it's interesting because you think about like experimental film and basically all of it is kind of, they're a little disruptive. They're basically, like you said, and just to kind of go back to tie it together, you talk about like watching, like Hollywood stuff has become so formulaic, and it's not even questioned. The way they do it, it's by society or by group, right? Like they'll sit in a room and they discuss what needs to be done, and they know exactly what plot point has to do whatever. And you know, it changes over time, but it is a formula. It's not like, hey, it's kind of formulaic. It is a formula. They almost all follow a formula. And what's cool about experimental films is they don't give a shit about that. And you could think historically on ones that just kind of fucked with that, even ones that didn't make our list here, because you made me think about it. It's like, typically they're not huge hits. There's very few huge hits out of it, but they become real big cult. Like they get big followings because they're weird. But yeah, I mean, the plot of it, like I said, the plot is basically, that's essentially all it is. An alien takes over basically a low life's body and experiences, like, how many times does he like bang chicks at the beginning of it just in weird scenarios? Like, remember the second one where it's just a disturbing scene? Was it the prostitute in the oh, it's just,
well, I don't know. Funny thing too is that like he ends up like, so when they're representing like the section of society that he gets into, a total underbelly of Cape Town. I don't know if Cape Town's really like that, but it doesn't show it in a very good light. But or at least that small section is very the seedy underbelly of it, and he gets dropped off in the horniest part of the town because it's constant, like he's constantly like running into people in like the sex trade or like prostitutes or pimps and all these kind of people. But he was like a drug addict to begin with, so he was already in that section of society because he was a junkie. But when the aliens come in and first they like put something into his wang, you know, like the fire in the sky experiments they do, and then they have like that one shot of just like these two like lightning beam things going, like one right into his mouth and then the on right into the other end of him, sort of like a human centipede thing, whatever they're injected into him. But it was just, I mean, it's just crazy from the beginning. The style of it's pretty cool. They do a lot of like kind of like GoPro sort of thing, so it's constantly moving. You feel like you're on a drug trip or feel like you're tripping out when you're watching it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's like there was a couple of scenes where you can tell they had some budget into it. Like, like when he first gets like his body taken over, there's some cool shots and imagery within that. But then a lot of the other stuff, it's just like they're strapping a GoPro to his head as he's walking around and seeing stuff. And some of it, like, I don't think, I mean, I have no idea. I couldn't look it up and find it, but I don't think this is a very big budget film. Although you could tell there's a handful of scenes within it that are like, well, let's put some budget here, let's put some budget there. but generally speaking, fairly low. I mean, like in a good way. Like there's just
Yeah.
and what those low budget scenes enable is a grittiness to it. Like there's this
Yeah.
sort of gritty, real feel
Mhm.
to a lot of the stuff that he's doing, and
Yeah.
it's disturbing in certain
It
scenes.
is, but it's also like it's disturbing, but it's also pretty enjoyable because it's obvious there's a lot of creativity that went into the movie, a lot of creativity and spark that went into this movie. Like this movie has a lot of life in it. I mean,
Mhm.
it's dirty, yeah, but it's got a lot of life and a lot of creativity, and it keeps moving fast, doing different things. And so like where the so the alien just goes in and has all these different series of adventures, but keeps meeting kind of like new and sort of different scummy characters and getting putting him in new situations. So it does not have like a very repetitive feel to it, which that's what really made it work for me.
Yeah.
And it moved along pretty fast for me. But I was really kind of like, well, this is cool. I'm seeing something. When I finished watching it, I was like, I'm seeing something different here, something that I don't usually see. And that's what those experimental movies, when they work, they're like a treat because there are like a few and far between. They can be a gem. Like this one, I think is a gem.
Yeah, and I also like the fact that if you take this road
Mhm.
as a filmmaker, like you don't have to make a lot of sense at times. Like
Yeah.
like the problem with, say, like, because there's a bunch of stuff and it just goes, it basically just, like I said, the whole idea, there's not much of a plot other than the fact that he gets taken over and goes through society and witnesses all this fucked up shit, and it just kind of like progresses through all that. I mean, there is a plot line
Yeah.
through it, but it's more like, yeah, like you said, meeting new characters, getting involved in more fucked up stuff,
Mhm.
and just seeing. And I know I was reading that was their original thing, is that
Mhm.
like an alien takes over a low life and witnesses the worst of society
Yeah.
and through his eyes. But
Yeah.
it also, it's like you can forgive certain stuff on it.
Mhm.
It's like, because if you do see a formulaic Hollywood movie and something fucks up there, all of a sudden you're going to call it out. But
Right.
in experimental films,
Mhm.
you don't really call it out because it's an experimental film, and it's firmly in that. I mean, it's definitely worth seeing, because I like you can also tell it's like they probably sat down when they were thinking of making it. They're like, okay, let's write down 5 or 6 really fucked up scenes that we
Mhm.
want to do, right? Like, and because you could tell that every once in a while there's a scene you're like, okay, this is weird. This is a
Yeah.
crazy scene. And then they just strung together the whole plot around these crazy encounters that the guy had.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's yeah. And I did like, there were certain violent scenes they put into it that I don't think you could get away with in
Mhm.
other films, but here it kind of flies. So
Yeah, yeah, it flies because you're dealing with a very like it's a surreal sort of atmosphere they present, and you can get away with a lot more as a filmmaker for that because it's sort of something that's like in an alternate reality. So
mhm.
it's sort of like how we're talking about with Walking Dead, how they're killing zombies, and like I think part of that is maybe like people's inner desire to probably like want to kill other human beings and then get away with it, but it's still it's a different scenario. It's zombies, it's not real people. So this one is an alien. Well, as far as we know, it's not real yet, but we
Yeah.
may discover that aliens
Yeah.
are real in the near future. There's been a lot of sightings.